tutorial for zxcvbn, I'm going to go over the features and do a little demo of some of the capabilities for this tracker script for norns. The first thing to do is to start it, and the first time you start it, you'll be asked to install. So go ahead and install, pressing K3, and wait. The first time it installs, it will load a demo script. So the demo script is here, and this script is basically controlled with a keyboard. So you'll need to attach a keyboard to the norns, so I've attached here, and then you can move around and enter in text and switch tracks, and I'll talk about that. But for now, you can play this demo script by saving it. Control S saves and parses the current screen, and then Control P will play it. Control number will switch between tracks. So here I've put a bunch of demo things on it, and I can talk more about how these things work. Maybe just a quick demo. I can play this track and then add this track. There's controls for filters and volume here on the norns. And all these sounds are being synthesized on the norns right now. You can also add samples like drums. Oh, those are vocals. These are drums. And this is also a sample, but it's a melodic sample. And then Control P will stop them. And I can talk more about those controls, or I call them invocations, later. So there's also ones to mute and kind of a bunch of other things. But for now, let's just go to a simple blank screen. And to do that, we can just restart the script. And instead of loading to that, it will load to a blank screen. If you want to reload the demo, it's in, you can load it from the preset. It will come automatically. You can just load, and then there it is again. But here I'm going to start from a blank slate. Now I'm going to go through the tutorial. There's some documentation online, and I'm basically going to go through it step by step and describe kind of how things work, what things do. And the basic syntax starts with entering in notes. So this is the default is going to be mx.synths, the polyperk, and you can just enter in notes by writing letters. So here I'm going to just write C, D, E, F, Control S to save, Control P will play that little scale. Now what's happening here is that these 4 notes are getting divided amongst the pulses in a line. So everything is divided into pulses. By default, there's 96 pulses per line. And if I put 4 things on a line, then each thing will get divided by 4, so 24 pulses each. Pulses are like steps. It's there's 24 pulses in 1 quarter note. But you're not limited to quarter notes or any traditional timing. You can do whatever timing you want. But if you put more things on a line, it'll divide up the pulses more. So if I put like C, E, G, C, E, G, this should be triplets because it's going to be dividing it by 12. Now, also note that it's playing on, I think, the 4th octave. You can change the octave by adding a number after a letter. So we can play this higher, actually. If you don't add a number, it will just use whatever was the previous closest number. And if I add another line, that line will also have its own subdivision. So this will be a slower triplet. So it goes back and forth between those two, dividing by 12 and then dividing by 3. Now, there's also rests, which are important. So if you want this to be in triplet timing, but say you don't want to play the E's, you can add in dots, and dots will be rests. So dots are given allotted pulses for that line, but no note will be played. Similarly, there's a dash, and a dash is a tie. So if you want to hold out the C, but then still maintain the same timing, I just replace all the rests with a dash. So between dashes, dots, and notes, you can, and then putting different things on different lines, you can get a lot of different timings. There's also a more granular control. So by default, each line has 96 pulses, and that can be configured using commands. So you can enter in notes like this, but you can also enter in commands. And commands start with non-note characters. So the notes A, B, C, D, E, F, G. So non-note characters correspond to commands. There's a lot of different commands, and I'll go through them, but the first command to know is maybe the pulse command, which is a P. So if you add a P and then add a number, that will determine how many pulses are given to this line. So if we change it to P24, it moves much faster, or we can do 192. So then it divides 192 pulses by the number of things, 12 things here. There's also some shorthand. You can use M for the measure, so that's 96, or you can do multiplication of these things, like 2 times N for 2 measures. There's also a half note, PH. You could do 2 times half notes, or that's 4 times quarter notes. All of these things are different ways of saying 96 pulses. And that, again, 96 pulses is the default. But you're not limited to just saying 96 or, even numbers of quarter notes. You could do 70, some weird number, and it will try to fit the notes in. So it will only give this line 70 pulses, but it'll fit those notes in the best it can, usually doing kind of the Euclidean rhythms to get them set. So in this case, it tries to fit 12 things onto 70 pulses, and you can offset them by using the O command. Oh, it's very hard to hear that, but there is a way to offset them so they're not starting on the first pulse. They can move the pulses across. Yeah, it's a little complicated because you have to think in terms of 24s, but really you don't have to think at all. You can just not change the pulses, and then you just remember that whatever you put into a line, that's going to be divided. So these are going to be quarter notes. Switch these to quarter notes too. And maybe I change some of these octaves. Yeah, so that's pretty much the simple way. It gets complicated quickly if you want to change the number of pulses to weird things. Oh, there's one other cool thing. So if you want to say have 3 beats on this one and 4 beats on this one, you could use the P 4 times quarter note, and then here P 3 times quarter note. So that will ensure there will be basically 7/4 time for this, because you're constraining this to 72 pulses, and this has the normal 96 pulses. If you don't put this one, then it will include the number of pulses from the last one. So you see it's playing a little faster than quarter notes. And all of these things are synced to the clock, so if you change the clock, then pulses will go faster or slower. And all the tracks themselves are also synced. So if I do Control 2 and go to the second track, I can make like a little bass line, C2, A2. So it plays C2 on the first measure, A2 on the next. And then this one plays this C6 thing on the first measure and then C4 on the next. So I play that one, and then this one will play. It's hard to hear, so I'll make this a little higher. But you know, you can also change this completely, so it has a different timing. So 30 pulses and I don't know, 70 pulses for who knows why. And then you're suddenly gonna get polyrhythms or just off rhythms. But everything is synced up to this 24 pulses per quarter note. It's kind of cool, actually, to do that. Yeah, so that's the basic syntax for entering notes. I will also, before going into the different clades, I can talk about chords. So notes are, you notice, they're always lowercase a, B, C, D, E, F, G. You can also do sharps like that. And you can do flats, but with flats you make sure if you have a note before it to add the octave. So this is going to be a C flat. But it can also be interpreted, if you do this, as a C and then a B. That's a way of writing a chord. Oh, so maybe I'll talk about that first. So you can write a chord just by entering the notes, C, E, G. So this is going to be a C chord and then A, C, E, an A minor chord. Now this thing with the flats I was talking about is that if I do that, that could be a C, E, B, G chord, or it could be a C, E flat, G. So it creates a C, E flat, G chord, but if you do want C, E, B, G, you have to put the octave before the B, just because of how flats are working. Flats are the same character as a B, unfortunately. You can always use everything in sharps, but going back to chords, so you can write chords just by clumping notes together. So these are not spaced. If you put spaces between them, they get divided across the pulses. If you don't have spaces, they aren't divided. And you can still add things, and then it will divide the chord with the notes. Now, like I mentioned, all of the notes are lowercase. If you do uppercase, it will assume it's a chord. So if I do uppercase C and uppercase A, let's do A minor. So uppercase C is a C major chord, and then uppercase AM is an A minor chord. You can also add octaves to chords, but it's a little different than notes. You have to use the semicolon. So this will be starting on a C4, and then this will be A minor in the fourth octave. You can also do all sorts of things like transposing. You can add like all sorts of augmentations. So if we play this with this. Oops. Yeah, so it's really easy to add in chords, really easy to add in notes. I guess next I'll talk about patterns before we go to the clades. So if you want to have these chords for maybe one section, and then you have another set of chords like E minor, G, B for another section, then you can do that. You just call them, you write pattern above it. So this will be pattern B, and this will be pattern A. And then you write chain at the top, where you can chain together A, and then B, B. Or you could write B times 2. Yeah, let's just do AB first. So A, B. So we're playing the C, A, and then we go to this side. Those octaves are kind of high. So chaining's cool because you can do some like math operations on it. So if you want to end with A's for some reason. So every time I do something, I do Control S to save it, and that will reload it automatically into the current state. So after this one, oh yeah, we're in the AB section. Yeah, so the chain and pattern, so they're kind of special. Chain, you denote the pattern names and how you want them arranged. And pattern is followed by the pattern. So everything below pattern is part of the pattern A. And it can be as long as you want. Pattern B can be as long as you want. You can have as many patterns as you want, and as long as chain as you want. And then they also are completely independent of each other track. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about the clades. The clades are basically sound engines. So you see at the top, there's mx.synths polyperk, but we can change that if you do shift left right, or in the mx.synths you can actually change with up down which synth it is. These are also available to change in the parameter settings. So track 1 is mx.synths, and then the synth is part of mx.synths. You can change to all these different things. So for instance, if we change it to this Casio, you can change it on the fly. That one's cool. So there's a couple others. This one is another synth, but it's not part of mx.synths. It's like a swell. I'll go through these clades, I guess, now. So each clade has a bunch of parameters specific to it. So the mx.synths one has these 4 mods, which change how they sound, and those are dependent on the synth that you have. There's also a sub, volume. Most of them have a pan. Most of them have a filter. They all show probability, attack, release. Let's raise the attack for this. Maybe increase the release. Notes will transpose by a tiny amount. There's a compressor, I can talk about that later. There's always a send. So there's a built-in reverb that's different than the regular norns reverb, called zverb. And zverb has a bunch of parameters and a shimmer. And it's sendable, so each track has its own reverb. And then there's another transpose, but this transpose is going to be transposing and then locking to the scale. So we can change to a different scale, and then anything we transpose will be in that scale. And these parameters that have little single letters next to them, those are commands that you can enter in, and I will talk more about that. And yeah, we can do we have a play and then a mute. And a lot of these things are available from this interface as well. So play is Control P and mute is Control M. Muting will allow you to continue to play the notes so that things stay in time, but they won't actually emit any notes until it's unmuted. That's useful because if nothing is playing and you start a track, it's going to start it at the beginning of the track. If there's a track muted, it will start it wherever it should be to be in sync with the rest of the tracks. In sync, but still have independent number of pulses. Okay, so there's a bunch of synths. So we have Icarus. Let's go back through these. E-piano, Toshia, this organ, Malone, kalimba. This is a synthesized kalimba. Piano, another piano, vowels, triangles, and a bass. Oh, it sounds cool with chords. And a super saw. Okay, and that's just mx.synths. So then we have the infinite pad, and then we have a melodic. So melodic won't play anything until you load a sample. So melodic is going to be one of the first sample-based clades, and you can load samples into any sample-based clade doing Control O or going in the parameters menu. So here I'm going to load a sample. I'll go to the data folder where I know I have one in samples. Let's load this bass. There's a bass or a piano. So these are for like single shots, and you'll see why. So you hold enter to load it. Oh, that was kind of fast. So you do Control O, and then left and right navigates through this menu. Up and down navigates. So I went to the right here to samples, and if I just press once, it will play the sound. So we have that one, we have this one. So I want to load that. To load it, you just hold enter, and then you have to wait till it loads up all the way. And here we have the sample. So you can, this screen you can get to through tab. So on sample-based clades, tab will go to the sample page. So on the sample page, you can hold down and it will play that sample. For the melodic clade, which is what we're in now, you'll see there's 4 of these little bars. There's 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm holding shift to move between them. And then you can press up to go and zoom in. Now what happens with the melodic clade is that the bar will essentially, let's see if I can put my finger in the right place, start here, and then it will move all the way to the end, and then it will bounce back to the second bar, and then bounce to the third bar, and then bounce between those two. So it helps it to be kind of an infinitely sustaining note, even if the note is too fast. Now this is a E, and we can change the note here in the parameters. The source note is going to be an E. So now it will actually be the right note when we play. And so the melodic can then be sequenced using whatever TLA you already have. Oh, but it's so low. Let's make a new pattern here. So get rid of this chain. If you ever get rid of something and you want to go back and do undo, Control Z. I'll actually undo that and then comment this out by using that, and then put a new chain. And you see it says pattern C not found because it doesn't like that there's no pattern C. So we can do a little bass line here. Oh, it's a little bit low. Oh, it's a little bit low because of the starting note. I think. Oh yeah, and also the attack is really high. So this is like an 808 sample. Here's a little trick. If you do Control up or down, it will change all those octaves to be higher or lower. So you can see it playing through now. And so this one you can essentially load any sample you want. So I did Control O and I can load in a piano. And this is going to be the wrong note, but you can get the idea. So those are just single samples that you can load in here and then play. And then on this screen, you can actually change the starting position if you want. This piano one, the obvious start position is probably here. But you can also do shift and move around. Up or down will zoom. So you can move around here and you can change those positions as well. Let's go back to, so that's melodic. Let's go to some other clades. We have next mx.samples, which is pretty similar, except this is using the mx.samples synth engine. So basically there's a bunch of samples round robin recorded that you can load in. And again, you can use up and down to load these in. So let's say I go back to our C, major 7, A minor chord on pattern A. So I'll just change this to A. And this should play some strings. Let's lower the octave here. And I'm gonna make this a little bit longer. So I'll do P, maybe 4 times M. So that'll be 4 times as long. It's maybe too long. So that's the P command is the pulse command. It's essentially telling it to do twice as many measures. Twice as many as the denoted measure, which is 96 pulses, so 192 pulses. And I'll get into this a little more, but here you can do commands, like I mentioned, the Z verb. So that is the reverb send, and it has that command Z. And if we enter a value between 0 and 100, that's going to change that parameter. So we just set it to 50%. Now when it's set, if I set it here, it'll get reset every time it gets to that note. Because we've set it here in the commands. And it's nice if you want to do it in, like, you know, change a different chord or note to a different reverb. And again, we can switch through different synths right here on mx.samples. It's the ultra synth. The mx.samples is kind of nice if you can find your sound, because it uses a lot less CPU. The synthesizers, the mx.synths, and the infinite pad will use the most CPU of anything. And there are tricks to using less CPU. One trick is essentially to, if you're doing mono stuff and you're not worried about chords, you can turn up this thing called the mono release. And it doesn't exist in mx.samples, but it does exist in mx.synths. So we go here to mono release and you turn that up, and that will make sure that each note cuts off when another note comes in. And that makes sure that notes don't overlap very much, because overlapping notes, still, you need to synthesize them and it costs CPU, even though you don't hear them as much. Okay, so that's mx.samples. These are the sequencers that you sequence with notes. The mx.synths, infinite pad, the melodic, and the mx.samples. The next two, softcut and drum, are samplers that you sequence with what I call hex notation. So let's go to a new track to mess around with those. So we'll go to track 3. And see, track 3 I haven't changed at all, so it's still on polyperk. So we'll move it to, softcut is great for recording. I'm gonna skip it for now, I think, because I don't have anything recorded plugged in. Well, maybe I can do it really quick. Yeah, so let's do softcut. So softcut is gonna be recording stuff. You can also load things into it and then overdub them, but it's really nice for recording. So maybe I'll just record some notes here from this little guy. I have to turn up the input. Okay, so in softcut, I will go to this tab screen, and basically you have a 45-second buffer here that's already been spliced out, and you can record any time into it by turning up this E1 and playing things, and it will start recording immediately. Now I just recorded a little thing in there, and I'm going to splice it. So you can splice easily by doing K1 K3, and it will go and determine the offsets for this recording. And most of it's silenced, but you can see over here we have some offsets. So here's a drum, number 1. Number 2 is nothing. We can move them around using this. So we have number 5 is this snare, and number 1 is this kick. And we can move this one, these two. Oh, this offset detection didn't work as well as it usually does, but it's okay. So we'll get this kick, and we'll get this snare. So again, I am demoing them with spacebar and moving between them by holding shift and moving around, and then up or down, you can zoom in on it. So when you select something, you can then sequence it using hex. So hex is going to be 0 through 9, or 3, 4, or A, B, C, D, E, F. So we have a instrument on 1, so it's going to be number 1. And basically this is going to be playing every measure. And then our other instrument was 3. Oh. Nope. Oh, it was 5. So now I'm sequencing those from softcut. And the real power of softcut, I think, is that you can actually continually record through this buffer and sequence stuff from it. So whatever is recording through will be sequencing automatically. And you can change the size of the buffer in the parameters. So by default, it's 30 seconds, not 45. And you can change that and lower it. But whenever you turn up the record, it will actually overdub and replace whatever is there. So the key thing here, though, is that you are not using notes for softcut. You're using this 0 through 9, A through F. Let's get a more in depth with that in the drum clade. So let's switch this clade to drum. And drum's not loaded, but we load it the same way. If you press tab, there's nothing there. So we do Control O, and then we go find some sample. Let's do some seamless loops. Oh, there's a bunch of drums. So let's load some drum. Now it will determine the offsets first. Onsets. I've been saying offsets, haven't I? It's onsets. So this one looks like it determined them a little bit better. We can move them to be a little closer. Yeah, this one is way better. So each of these is a note. And you can sequence them just by writing out like something like that. Now, by default, it's only going to be playing until it gets to the end of its sample. So if we just have that, it will play the first part of, and it stops when it gets to the next. So there's no endpoint. Well, the endpoint is defined by the next starting point. Now, there is a way to modify this. If we go into the drum parameters, there's a thing called play through. And instead of playing through until the next slice, you can do until the end, until the stop. So now it's going to play through all the way. Now this is nice. If we do this rhythm like this again, we won't get it stopping a lot, but it's not at the right beat exactly. So you can change the BPM that it tries to figure out for it by modifying this, but I think we need to slow it down. So the BPM of the source material is a little faster, and then it's trying to match it to the current BPM. Yeah, so that is a lot of fun. And then drum has its own set of parameters. So it has decimate, drive, and compression. So if we play with those, you can highly compress it, drive it, oops. Yeah, you can change the rate of it. Decimate. You can also gate it, which will cut off notes. And all these things can be sequenced. So what the heck happened? Yeah, we can sequence some of these things. So let's do that. Let's say this will be, that's the gating, H50. And we can change that to 90. And it will play longer, but we can add it to different notes. Yeah, I guess I'm still going through. Yeah, I'll just do the rest of the clades and then we'll go back into commands because there's some stuff to talk about commands. So that's drum. Now we still have two other clades, and the other clades are crow and midi. So I don't have any midi devices, so you can't select between any. In crow, there's 1 and 2 or 3 and 4 if you have a crow. Both of these are sequenced by notes. So you can set a track to a MIDI device and then play through, and then all of these notes will be sent to your MIDI device. For these two clades, there are fewer options because you can't change filters and things on them, but you can affect the probability a note will happen, the note transpositions, the note locking the scale, mute groups, muting, playing, channel. And usually I use this where it will come back through the input of the norns, and there you also have some options. So the audio input here normally is in stereo mode, which is like I think what you would normally assume would happen, but you can also switch it to mono. So now we can control the amplitude and the pan individually of each channel coming in. So you can center, if you want to, both of the channels coming in. So you can have you have two things sequenced on the left and right, and they can be both coming in the center onto the norns. That's kind of nice. Now let's go back. Yeah, let's talk about commands. So commands, we can do maybe the drums for some commands. So commands are written basically with a letter and then a number 0 to 100 usually, but not always, like that. And commands latch. So this command will set the gating, the hold amount, to 90%, and it will continue on for the rest of the notes. You can also set it to pick a random value. So to do that, you can just use a comma. So we can say either 50% or 100%, or you can add 75%. So each time it plays this measure, it's going to select one of these to do the hold. And if you don't want it to be random, you use a dot. So if we want to first do 50% hold and then 100% hold, it's not doing it. Maybe a bug here, but that should work. The other way to do it is to use the colon, which will select a value between those two things. So between 50 and 100, it will select something. So we can go here and see. the whole gate or the hold is 50, 68. It's selecting some random number between them. I'll talk about some other commands. So we have, that's the hold command. We have the volume. So I like volume. Let's do a cool thing with volume. Maybe is in decibels. So V is volume, and you can increase it here, or you can set it while you're sequencing. So let's do, instead of until stop, we'll do until next slice. And then we'll filter it a little bit. Turn it down. So here we're going to pick a random volume. Sometimes loud, sometimes quiet. And we can make it play faster by changing the number of pulses given to this line. And let's see if the ordering will work here. Yeah, there we go. So the ordering is working. So it's going to do a loud and then soft. So we can do like a cool thing like loud, soft, soft, loud, soft, soft, loud, soft. So here, 6 is plus 6 decibels, minus 6 is minus 6 decibels. And let's play this fast. It's kind of like an echoey thing. And these can be any decibels you want, really. And then we can still change which part of it's playing on the sample. What other commands do we have here we can play with? So we have volume, we have pan, so we can randomly pan it between the left, which is minus 50, and the right. We have a filter, so we can set the filter here. Filter is set in numbers between 0 and 100. So we can do like 50, pick something randomly between 50 and 100. And we have probability, so probability is Q. And we can choose a random probability between 80 and 100. Sometimes it should skip. Yeah, you're hearing skip sometimes. Attack and release, those are straightforward. K and L, you can use those. So if you wanted to change the release time to maybe kind of long, let's do 200 milliseconds. Or a short, 2 milliseconds. Or a long attack. Oh, sorry, I got those confused. Attack is K, and then delay or release is L. And these latch, so once I set them, they're set here too. And once they're not set in the command, then you can change them again. Some of these don't have commands that you can change, so like compression and drive can't be changed. Note and rate can be changed. Another good one is the transpose. So if we transpose a sample, it'll play different parts of the sample. So if we set it to maybe choose random notes. So it's now going to be choosing random things. Oops. There's a cat paw there. All right. So that's just one line. We got kind of a crazy thing going on. I want to talk about another kind of interesting command. So all of these commands you can find in the help, which is at this website, zxcvbn. So if you go there, you can find all this information I'm saying. So another really useful command is the arpeggio command, and I will go back into our chords to show that, but the arpeggio will also work in the drum, and I'll show that too. So let's play a new chain D. So pattern D will be a C major chord, and we'll use supersaw. Let's use a kalimba. So we've got a kalimba here. Oh, let's get rid of some of the reverb. It's gonna be, and then we don't want to attack. Nice release. Great. So that's the kalimba just playing C chord. Now, if you want to do an arpeggio, like say you want to do C, E, G, E, you can write it out, or you can use a command. So there's a command called R, which is for arpeggio. And there's different arpeggios, so if you look at the documentation, you can see what the letters are. But U is going to be up, like C, E, G. And then there's multiple commands to manipulate this. You just have that, it's going to just do C, E, G, you do up, down. Now, up, down won't work unless you add in more steps. So you can add in more steps by doing S and then saying we want maybe 4 steps. I'm not sure why it's not going down. It's another thing to look at. Yeah, we can go down if we just do that. You can also change the timing. So if we do T, it's kind of like the pulses, where you can give it, you can specify the number of pulses per note. And since you can specify the steps, it will go up in octaves to get the number of steps that you specify. Oh yeah, it didn't do the up down because we didn't have enough steps, because you need multiple steps to go up and then down. So then this is a command. All of these things are commands, these 3. So if we add in another note, it will play that chord arpeggio and then just play the E. So half the pulses are given to this E and half the pulses are given to this whole arpeggio thing. There's some cool ones, like there's thumb up. There's divergent, convergent, there's divergent, convergent, convergent, divergent, thumb, up, down. I think that there's pinky, up, down. Yeah, yeah, this is great, okay. And then, yeah, you can put these on all your chords. So I'm gonna copy with Control C and then paste. And then on this chord, I'll change it to A minor. So now we just have arpeggios of a kalimba. Keep that going. So if we go back to our drums, we have this wild drum thing. We can also do a chord by removing the space between the notes. So that will play all these 4 slices at the same time. But instead of playing them at the same time, we'll play them we'll play them in arpeggio. So we'll do the up, down, give it 12 pulses per thing, and then give it 12 steps, or however many steps you want. And it's gonna basically go from 0, 1, 2, 3, and then do up, and then go back down. And it's just gonna do this by selecting samples. So you can pretty quickly get really interesting stuff. Drums are really fun to slice, but it's also fun to slice just random. Oh, do I have a random sound? Yeah, I've never sliced this. Let's see what happens. Because it will slice it in time. That's cool. Let's push it up a few notes. I really like field recording with birds. You can get the birds chirping in time and stuff. It's great. And again, you can do the same stuff with the softcut, but softcut has the benefit of being able to record in. Okay, so those are most of the commands. I guess I'll mention there's a special command for each clade called J. So we switch to something like the supersaw. For some reason a little loud. The supersaw, we can use the J command to randomize or change the mod. So in the mx.synths, the J command changes the mod. So like J50 will change the first mod. So we change it to 2. It will lower it. There it is. But it's fun to set it. So 0 to 100 will be the first mod. 100 to 200 is the second. 200 to 300 is the third. 300 to 400 is the fourth. So if you set it to a random value between 0 and 400 using this colon notation, we very quickly get random aspects of the supersaw, as these mods are then being randomly kind of modified. So sometimes I do this to get a good sound, and then when I like it, I stop the track, turn these off, so now those are frozen, whatever those values are. So J is different for each track. J is the just for, each clade it's different for. So for drum, it changes the decimation. For the infinite pad, it will change the swell. And for softcut, it will change the recording value. So for softcut, you can do J100 and it will start recording at 100%. So you can actually sequence what you're recording while you're playing it, which is cool. Yeah, so commands. Oh, there's one more command that's useful to talk about, and this is probably the most advanced command, is the mover command. So the mover command is an LFO. So if we type in M, that's the mover command, then you type in a mod, or a command, so like the filter is I. So I can write I50 and that will filter. I90 will open the filter, and I can have a LFO do that by doing M on the filter, move that filter, and then we're going to write the period in pulses. So let's say 192 pulses. That'll be 2 measures. It'll move from 50 to 90. And we can actually see that filter change here. And most parameters are able to be moved with this LFO command. I know the syntax is a little funky, and again, if you go into the docs, you can find all this syntax and examples on how to use them. But yeah, so basically every command can be controlled through an LFO on every track, which is also fun. Let's see, I think that is the most I wanted to say for commands. Yeah, those are basically everything from H to Z is a command that you can use to modulate. Now I'll talk about some other kind of extra things. So one is the tape. The tape is every track can be recorded internally to a little digital tape. So say we're playing this track. You can hit Control R and you'll see this blinking thing on the bottom. And when it gets to the start of a chain, it'll record that into a tape. So now what's happening is it's muted, so it's not actually playing any notes. It's only playing it from the tape that we've recorded, this internal tape. You can stop it with Control P, or you can stop it with Control T, toggle the tape. So if we untoggle the tape, the notes are still coming through because they're muted. They're not going to be actually played, but we can toggle on the tape, which will play back what we recorded. So we can then, you know, play something at the same time. Oops. So we are playing the tape, and now I'm playing these chords in pattern A with the tape. To stop the tape and just play, you can do Control T and then Control T again to turn on. It won't turn on again until it comes to the beginning of a chain, so it's still in sync with everything. So tapes are a way to basically record some stuff that you have synthesized, or it's very useful to record things that you're sequencing externally. So you can overdub, not necessarily overdub, but you can record onto each track individually. Each track has its own tape, and you can record, if you're sequencing different synthesizers, monophonic synthesizers, you record it onto each track and then have them all be playing and toggled separately. There's also, I guess this is more of an experimental thing right now, but there is a feature right now that if you play a tape, you can activate the loop ambisonics mode, and when you do that, the tape will be played with these pseudo ambisonics that I've added. Basically what's happening is it's going to be panning this tape to the right and left, and then changing the delays so it sounds like it's coming around your head. And that's random, so if you have a bunch of these tapes playing, they'll kind of be circulating. It's a lot like ooh or acrostic, basically, in that sense. Not sure if it will stay, but right now it's there in the meta parameters. Okay, so now I'll just talk about kind of like housekeeping stuff. So if you want to save your everything you've done, you can do that by going to preset and then saving. And that will save everything. Now, it's kind of nice to have the saves come back when you restart, and that is an option that is available. To activate the option, you go to the meta and load default and say that yes. So now when I start, it's gonna load up where we just were, our last preset that was saved. Oh, for some reason it needs to determine offsets again. That's, okay, maybe bug number 3 maybe, but this should be where we were. And so like if we unmute this, we have our tape that we recorded playing below, and we have our synthesis stuff. All the patterns are, all the tracks are here. Along these lines, say we have, like this one, I'm using this sample, Mancini, and if you want to share your preset with somebody, it's hard to do because you have your samples somewhere on your norns, but there is a easy way to kind of create bundles, and that's to go to the edit, go to the meta. But yeah, you can go through these menus with the keyboard too. So if you go to meta and then you say make archive, that will make this file, which is in the data folder, and that file basically contains everything. So if you then go to load archive, it contains everything, including the samples, and loads them into folders that it can load from any norns. So if we load, we can load that archive and load exactly what someone else or you had on their norns, including all the samples. So it's like a self-contained, like a mod file or something. Yeah, so everything is there. And, oh yeah, there's maybe one thing I forgot to talk about in the drum clade. What else should I say though first? Yeah, okay, I'll talk about that. So there's a kick here, it's a synthesized kick, and the synthesized kick is especially for the drum clade. So it's best maybe if I open some kind of drum. Those are drums. I don't know what this is. Let's load this up. Now the kick basically allows you to apply, add in a kick onto any on any slice. So let's find a kick maybe. It's not a kick, but let's add a kick to it. So to do that, you just go to the sample screen and then turn E1. And you see the dBs, we're raising the dB of a kick. So now whenever you sequence number 3, let's comment out this, so we sequence number 3. Oh, sorry, it should be number 2 actually. Sorry, because of the way that they're named, this is starting at 3. Oh, no, I'm just reading it wrong. That's track 3. No, something's funky. Anyway, maybe another thing I need to look at. Anyway, you can add in this kick, and the kick is controlled by all these parameters. You can change the bass note and all these other parameters for it. So it's kind of for adding kicks into your drums if they don't have a kick already, like this one. And yeah, I think that's it. There's a couple other kind of cool things you can do. So if you have multiple norns, you can open up this script on both norns and they'll automatically sync right away. As long as they're both on the same Wi-Fi network, they sync up perfectly. You don't have to do anything to do that. They just sync. And that means that if you play one track on one norns and another track on another norns, they will be at the same time. So one starting one, the other one will have the same starter measures if you have the same number of pulses in each measure. And yeah, I think the best thing to do is kind of play around, read the documentation, ask questions, and have fun. There's a lot to explore. There's a lot of ways to use this. I don't think there's any wrong way to do it. And it's pretty easy to add things that you want because the code is actually not very long. That's it. Have fun.